$3.5 million. That is the number of women currently living in the United States with a history of breast cancer. Every 8 minutes, a woman dies of cervical cancer in India. 18.1 million new cases of cancer were diagnosed worldwide in 2018. These are sobering statistics, but at the end of the day, they were just numbers to me, till I heard the words that would forever change my life. All 3 sites have tested positive for cancer. I was 34 years old, and in what I thought was the prime of my health. I was a mother of 2 young kids and breastfeeding. Only 3% of women develop breast cancer while breastfeeding. I was now part of the elite 3%. Diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer that had spread to my lymph nodes meant that I was in for the deluxe package of cancer treatment: chemotherapy, surgery, followed by radiation. I felt like I was losing control, losing my sense of self. I had no control over my test results or the staging of my cancer. Treatment decisions were being made for me to give me the best chance of survival. Decisions on what body parts I'd get to keep. But what made matters even worse is that I'm a controls engineer by trade. Control is in the title. For those of you who don't know, we develop algorithms using control theory to design systems that are predictable in their behavior. Let's just say losing control is my kryptonite. So, what does a controls engineer do when her life is spiraling out of control? Create a spreadsheet with multiple tabs. I had my treatment plan, surgery dates, matrix to chart my symptoms, a list of friends and family I could call on. Further sub-categorize into their abilities: childcare, meal delivery, errand boy, capable of handling a 3 a.m. phone call. I had a plan. And my beat cancer spreadsheet looks solid on paper. When I pasted it to a wall in our master bedroom, you better believe I did that, one thing became abundantly clear to me: the enormity of this fight. If it takes a village to raise a baby, it's going to take a bloody army to beat cancer. I was going to need all the help I could get. And for that, I would have to be open and honest about my diagnosis and ask for help. Let's face it, nobody likes asking for help, least of all strong, independent female engineers. But I knew what I had to do. And so, raw, exposed, and overwhelmed, I started sharing the news. When I first broke the news, I was cautioned. Are you sure you want people to find out? Subconsciously, I was aware that in my culture, cancer is a taboo topic. I grew up in India, where there is an indelible shame surrounding cancer. And I knew what some of these underlying notions were. It must be karma. You're paying for your sins. The result of immoral behavior, a modern lifestyle. And if all else fails, it's the evil eye. This belief that an unkind gaze and jealousy can cause misfortune. The Livestrong Foundation conducted a study to understand perceptions surrounding cancer in India. They analyzed multiple media outlets and ran a public opinion survey. With a combination of this qualitative and quantitative data, they were able to deduce the following. 53% of Indians are likely to agree that people with cancer brought it on themselves. Professor Van Hollen from the renowned Wilson Center spent 25 years researching women's health in India. And she found that one of the most striking facts about cancer in India is how stigmatized it is. Women fear that their reputation and that of the family would suffer with such a diagnosis. On a personal note, I have witnessed women endure treatment in isolation because they didn't want to bring dishonor to the family name. I, for one, never condoned stigmatizing cancer. But I also didn't do anything about it. Now that I was the one facing the disease, I had a paradigm shift in perspective. Why should I hide my disease and suffer in silence? This is not my fault. So for a while, I thought it must be Indian women living in India that struggle to deal with this shame, and that it is my cultural bias that's causing me to feel this way. But that was naive of me. In 2017, the BBC published an article titled UK South Asian Women Hiding Cancer Because of Stigma. The NHS looked into health inequalities and found that some South Asian women living in the UK will go to the extent of refusing treatment because they don't want people to find out. This article also featured a 36-year-old who hid her disease because she grew up in a strict Indian community where even talking about cancer is shameful. So, you've got Indian women in India, South Asian women in the UK. I sensed a bigger trend here. There must be other cultures that struggle to deal with this shame. And it didn't take me long to find out this was just the tip of the iceberg. In 2007, the Livestrong Foundation conducted a global cancer research study where they interviewed and surveyed healthcare professionals, caregivers, and survivors across 10 countries. They found that the stigmatization of cancer is in fact an endemic issue. In Japan, a healthcare professional said that cancer is associated with hush-hush attitude. Another, in South Africa, suggested that cervical cancer is highly stigmatized because cervix is part of the body you don't speak about. In Mexico, cancer may be seen as punishment, something I can relate to. But let's take a step back, deconstruct from this worldview to something that might hit closer to home. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear about a lung cancer diagnosis? In the United States, public perception assumes that lung cancer patients were smokers and thus responsible for their disease. This was according to a paper on lung cancer survivorship. Lung cancer is also associated with greater levels of psychological distress than any other cancer in the US. And this is regardless of smoking status. Patients report feeling stigmatized because of the strong correlation between lung disease and smoking. So this stigma that I erroneously thought was unique to India is in fact a cultural bias that spans across cultures. And that realization right there made my goal in life clear. Well, first and foremost, to kick cancer's butt, and to be that overbearing Indian mother who buys a house across the street from her 2 grown children. But to also do my bit to help destigmatize cancer. I started small by telling friends and family. The next big step was coming clean to my children. During chemotherapy, I hid under my wig because I didn't want my 4-year-old to find out that I was follically challenged. One day, I decided to ditch the wig, and I waited nervously for my husband to bring the kids home from preschool. My son ran through the door, gave me a hug, and started playing Lego. He didn't even notice I was bald. I could look like a toad, and it wouldn't matter one bit. I'm still mom. I used my diagnosis as a pedestal to talk about the C word at work. But talking didn't seem enough. So I wrote a book. because what else am I going to do with my disability leave? The book goes into excruciating detail about my cancer journey, but it also provided a safe space for me to talk about the victim blaming and the guilt-ridden appointments I had with my oncology team as a result. The book served as a pedestal for me to reach strangers. But even that isn't enough. We need to come together across cultures to raise awareness, help survivors and their families. I know you're with me when I say, friends don't let friends fight cancer alone. Now, if you find out that a loved one, your colleague, a friendly neighbor, has been recently diagnosed and you don't know where to start, here's a list of things you can do to help. Number 1, leave judgment at the door. Speculating the cause of cancer inadvertently places blame on the survivor. When I was asked questions like, how long did you wait to report the lump? How come the disease progressed so far? Do you think you missed symptoms because you were breastfeeding? I was left with a sense of blame. And how is that helpful? As a society, we often talk about unconditional love. I say, let's start with unjudgmental support. 2, well, actually, there is no 2. This is it, the golden rule. I bet some of you thought I was going to pull out my beat cancer spreadsheet again. Don't get me wrong, that work of art is currently in circulation at the Cancer Center in Columbus with the hopes of helping other patients mobilize their army. And during treatment, I needed meal deliveries, grocery runs, people to take the kids off our hands so I could rest. But the most important thing us survivors need is support free of judgment. Everything else is secondary. Now, if you follow my golden rule and still find that someone chooses to be private about their journey, just know that they're likely grappling with some very complex emotions. My name is Niyati Tamaskar. I'm a 1.5 years into remission. Let's destigmatize cancer together. Thank you.